Hi everyone, welcome to CTPS Education. In this video, let's see about Hibernate interview questions and answers. Let's start. Before seeing about Hibernate, we need to know what is ORM. It stands for Object Relational Mapping. As the name says, it is used to map the data between the Java objects and the relational database. To understand it better, in Java, everything will be in objects or POJO classes format. Whereas in database, everything will be in tables format. So to connect these two, we need one tool that is called ORM. The advantages of this is better system architecture and also it will reduce the coding time. What is JPA? It is a specification. What it tells means it specifies how to access, manage and persist data with the database. And Hibernate is one of the implementations of JPA. This is very important interview question. So to know the difference also, first we need to understand JPA is just a specification. So to implement that, we are using Hibernate. Now let's see what is Hibernate. It is one of the ORM tools only. Also, it is a Java framework and it is mainly used to perform operations with the DB. That is like storing, manipulating and retrieving data from the database. Advantage are open source and it is lightweight, faster performance, lazy loading and caching. What is HQL? The expansion of this is Hibernate Query Language. We know Hibernate is used to perform operations with the database. How that is done means with the help of this Hibernate Query Language only. So it is the query language of Hibernate framework. And it is very similar to SQL only, except here it uses class names instead of table names. Advantages are it is easy to learn, it avoids complex queries, then it is database independent. What is the difference between JDBC and Hibernate? This question is similar to why we should use Hibernate instead of JDBC. Let's see them. JDBC, it is a database connectivity technology, whereas Hibernate, it is a Java framework. JDBC uses SQL, Hibernate, it uses HQL. And the most important point, in JDBC, coding time will be more, whereas and also there will be lesser performance, whereas in Hibernate, it removes boilerplate code. So coding time will be reduced and also performance will be improved. And JDBC is it is dependent on the database, whereas Hibernate, it is independent of databases. List some databases that Hibernate can support. DB2, MySQL, Oracle, HSQL, PostgreSQL. There are some more, but these are the important databases. What are the core concepts of Hibernate? First one, configuration, then SessionFactory, session, transaction, query and criteria. Let's understand more about the core concepts of Hibernate in high level. First, configuration. Here the database related information and the properties of the SessionFactory is mainly mentioned. So the configuration object is created and by using the configure method, this configuration file is called. Then SessionFactory should be created. What is this means? It is mainly used to create the sessions. So this SessionFactory is created by using the reference of the configuration object and by using the build SessionFactory method. Then session is created. This session is mainly used to get physical connection with the database. So this kind of session is opened by using the factory, that is SessionFactory dot open session. Now we can perform some operations. So for that we need to create transaction object. So this transaction is created by using the session object dot begin transaction. Then now we have one employee class. So in this employee class, if we want to save some data means we can save that by using the session object dot save method. To commit this information, at last we need to close the session. Explain about SessionFactory interface and is it thread safe? As we saw earlier, it is responsible for the creation of session objects and it is created during the application startup itself. So it is a heavyweight object. And there is one more important point, that is there is a rule like one session factory should be created per database. For example, if we have MySQL and Oracle database in our applications means, then we should have 2 session factories. Also, the session factory is a thread safe and it can be used by all the threads of an application. Explain about session interface and is it thread safe. In short, session is mainly used to get physical connection with the DB. So, it provides methods to store, update, delete or fetch data from the database. So, it is mainly used for performing operations also. So, what are the methods means? Persist, update, delete, load, get, etc. So, this session consists of query, criteria and transaction, and it is not thread safe. So, to perform any operations, first we need to open the session, then we can perform the CRUD operation. After that, we need to close that session. What is transaction? In general, it represents a unit of work. So, that means some set of sequential operations. So, this transaction only completes if all the operations are completed successfully. To understand this better, let's take one example. If you want to send someone amount through online means, all those operations like if we want to send it through some online banking or something, and then it should be received by the receiver. In case if that is failed means it should be reverted back. So all those are like sequential operations. So that is called transaction. This transaction is associated with session and it can be instantiated by calling session.begin transaction. What is Hibernate configuration? This configuration, it mainly contains the database related information. That is database URL, username, password, those things will be there. Other than that, it consists of property to initialize the session factory. Also, it contains mapping files and entity class details. How this can be done means by using 2 ways. First one, XML based configuration, that is by using hibernate.cfg.xml file. Then through programmatic configuration, that is by using some code logic. What is criteria and query in Hibernate? Both of them are present in session interface only. Criteria means it is used to retrieve data from the database. How the object of criteria is created means by calling the create criteria method that is present in the session interface. So session.create criteria, and inside this we want to pass the actual class for which we need to perform this operation. Then query, it is used to perform retrieve or modify the data from the database. So this is the main difference. By using criteria we can only get the data, whereas in query we can perform both, like getting the data, also we can modify the data. How this object for query is created means by calling the create query method. So session.create query, and inside this we can pass the actual query. What are the different states of objects in Hibernate? First one, transient state. Here when the object is created newly means and it is not associated with the session, then that time the object will be in transient state. Example, employee emp is equal to new employee. So here we have created this object newly by using new operator. Then persistent state. If session is open and operations are performed means, then that object will be in persistent state, and also all the changes to this object will be tracked by the Hibernate now. So here by using the session object we are doing some save operation here, save of emp. So now this object will get tracked. Then detached state, if the session is closed, then Hibernate will no longer know about this object. So session.close, if you are performing, now this object will come to detached state. What is lazy loading in Hibernate? It means fetching and loading the data only when it is needed from DB instead of loading the entire data. So obviously the advantage is improved performance of data fetching. And by default this lazy loading will be true. We can override it by using one annotation called @lazy. Inside that we can pass the value as false. What is the difference between save, saveOrUpdate and persist methods? All these methods are used to save some data in the database, but there are some differences. Let's see them. First, save method. It is used to insert new record if it is not there in the database. But if you are again trying to insert the same record means then this save will fail. That is, we will get some exception. Then saveOrUpdate. As the name says, it is used to insert new record if it is not there in the database. If it is already there means then this will update it. Then persist method. This persist can be done only within the transaction boundaries. It has no return type. Whereas save can be used outside transaction also. What is Hibernate caching? Consider we have a scenario like one data is going to be called many times. So what will happen that time? Each time data will hit the database and so the performance will be reduced. So to avoid that, this caching will be used. How means? This caching will act as a layer between the actual database and your application. So it reduces the time taken to obtain the required data. How means? It will fetch the data from memory only instead of directly hitting the database. So this caching layer will store that values for some time. So that if that same data is again going to be called means it will load from this memory. Types of caching. First level cache. It is the first place that Hibernate checks for cached data. And the main thing is it is enabled by default in Hibernate since performance will be improved. And where it will be there means session object will hold that. This will not be available to the entire application. Then second level cache. If data is not there in the first level cache means then it will check in the second level cache. This second level cache, it will not be enabled by default. That is, we have to enable it explicitly. And where this will be there means SessionFactory object will hold this data. This cache is available to the entire application. How to integrate Hibernate with the Spring Boot? This is very important interview question. First, after creating the Spring Boot application by using Spring Initializer or something, we have to add the required dependencies in the pom.xml. The main dependency is Spring Data JPA. Then configuration changes we have to do, that is data source related configurations and mappings and bean creations, those things we can do. Then entity or Pojo class. It is used to create model structure to work with the database. Then controller. By using this, we can create the REST endpoints. Then service. Here only we can handle the business logics. Then DAO or repository layer. So by using this, we can it will provide the methods to perform the CRUD operations with the database. What are some of the annotations used in Hibernate? First one, at entity. It is used to define the classes entity bean. Then at table. By using this annotation, we can mention the table name that should be created in the database. Then at ID. It is used to define the primary key. Then at generated value. For the generation strategy, auto means default, then identity, sequence, table. Then at column. It is used to define the column properties in the database. Then there are some annotations related to the relationships. At one to one, at many to one, at many to many. Then at join column, this is also related to this relationship entity only. It is used to specify a mapped column for joining an entity association. Then at join table, it is used to join the tables. Then one of the important annotation is at transient. It is used to ignore fields to save in the database. So if you don't want one field to be saved in the database means we can mention that by at transient annotation.